Welcome back, everybody, to Watcher of All Things. My name is Kiki, and this is my podcast where I talk movies, TV shows, and all things entertainment. And today, it is episode 111, where we are talking about Undertone, a fun little Canadian horror film. I went to the press screening on Monday night. We're going to talk all about it, all of the spooky, creepy little details that go into this movie and how it was made. Before we get to that, I hope you are all doing well. It is a crazy Friday the 13th evening where we're having a snowstorm in Toronto, and it's March 13th. Like, what are we doing anymore? The first winter that I moved to Toronto, it's awful weather all year. But okay, anyways, other than that, it is also Oscar weekend. I am very excited for the Oscars. Again, if you haven't watched my Oscar hopes and predictions video, let me just plug that at the top of the show. You can go check it out on the YouTube channel. Thank you to everybody that has watched it. Really just had so much fun making it. Those kind of videos every year, it's a huge undertaking when I did it last year and this year, but it's just fun. I don't know, trying to statistician it. What do you call a person that does statistics? I don't know, but and then it's fun when, you know, who I think is going to win actually isn't who I want to win, because you get that little bit of difference in opinion. It's been fun talking to different people about who they think is going to win at the big ceremony on Sunday, but that's going to be a good time. By the time you're listening to this, the Oscars will have happened. But as for today, timestamps below. Of course, we are talking about a horror movie, so you don't really want the spoilers. I don't want to ruin not the premise. You can know the premise, but I don't want, you to know the big swing. So I'm going to be very diligent in the non-spoiler section. For that, we have a bunch of news to get to. Then we will hop into our review. Then we will end the show with what else I watched, where I have some great Oscar nominees to catch up on. I saw a new movie in theaters this week. I saw a classic movie in theaters this week at a new theater that I haven't been to. And of course, we have Survivor 50 to talk about. That's going to be an absolute blast. But first, let's get into the news. Our first piece of news, I was going to talk about something that happened in the Timothée Chalamet ballet opera thing, but honestly, I am so sick of hearing about that. It's been a week and it was a nothing statement. People are just jumping on it to get clout, like Jamie Lee Curtis. It's so lame. Even some people have taken back their statements already, like Doja Cat being like, yeah, I was just doing it to get attention. So let's move on to another story. That is, Kate Winslet is set to play the female lead in Andy Serkis's The Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum. So Deadline can exclusively confirm that Kate Winslet will join Andy Serkis's Middle-earth epic, The Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum, in what has been described to us by sources as the female lead. Serkis and Peter Jackson spent most of the last year coaxing Winslet to appear in the film, which means uprooting her family to New Zealand to shoot her scenes in the film from late May through to October. Now, there has also been a story this week, sort of last week, that it's actually going to be a new trilogy for The Lord of the Rings. It is not just going to be a single film with The Hunt for Gollum. Interesting that we are revisiting this, because was The Hobbit one movie or two movies or three movies? I feel like it was three movies. Hey Alexa, how many Hobbit movies are there?
Two movies in the Hobbit series since the first one. The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, came out in 2013.
Alexa, stop. Well, there you go. Okay, there's only been two of them. I was going to say it could have been an interesting... Alexa, stop. Oh my God. I was going to say it is interesting that, it could have been a Star Wars situation where we have the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and now we're going to get a sequel trilogy, or The Hunt for Gollum's an in-between a trilogy, whatever we want to deem this trilogy, because it's taking place during The Lord of the Rings or between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. I'm not sure. I'm really not a Lord of the Rings expert. Now, up to, this moment, I have been very skeptical about the new Lord of the Rings films. I don't really know, especially, coming off of The Hobbit. I know those movies were not critically successful, I guess, and the fans don't love the second one. I have watched them with my diehard Lord of the Rings fan friends, and they absolutely hate the second Hobbit movie. I've even done so much of my homework that I've watched the animated Hobbit and Lord of the Rings films, so there you go, Ralph Bakshi, one of those. I've talked about it on the show, actually, but I have to say, I am getting a little bit more and more curious about this new Lord of the Rings film and The Hunt for Gollum. I like that Kate Winslet is cast. I think that's a very strong lead. She's going to bring some real star power. I feel like she doesn't do a ton of franchise stuff. I mean, she has a really interesting filmography recently because she did Lee, obviously, which was she nominated for, was it a Golden Globe or an Oscar? I think it was a Golden Globe, right? And, that was a Sky original. And then she directed a film this year, which was also really interesting. I didn't see that one. I listened to a couple of her podcast interviews, and it's just very fascinating, the sort of long-term long-term staying power that Kate Winslet has had throughout her career. I mean, she's one of the biggest stars of our lifetime. Of course, she's in Titanic. Everybody knows her from that. And of course, she's done the Avatar films, right? That's the franchise that she has done recently, but that, that's a voice and motion capture role. So it's a little bit different. Like, people, I don't think, are going into Avatar being like, oh, I'm going to see it because it's Kate Winslet, the star of Titanic. People are like, it's Avatar. I'm not really sure who is voicing some of these people, but oh, Kate Winslet's in it. And it's always a surprise when you hear that. So her being on the poster of The Hunt for Gollum, I think, it's a great move. I understand why Circus was probably pursuing her because she has that star power. I think she's still a big name. She was in Mare of Easttown a couple years ago, which I think was a fantastic show. If you haven't watched it, if you've seen Task, you should watch it. I mean, it's so good. Same creator. So I see this as good news. It's very exciting for me. I'm starting to really look forward to this movie. I want to see it come together. I mean, I think the first trailer is going to be such a clear indication whether The Lord of the Rings, what trajectory they're going to take. Is it going to be like a 28 years later thing where definitely not on the box office side, but like creatively, are they going to be this masterfully made, really well done practical films, or are they going to take on a kind of Star Wars or Marvel-ish thing where it's just CGI slop, it's all gray smoke and mirrors? I don't know. I do hope there's some artistry in them, however. But Andy Serkis being the director worries me a bit. I mean, Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage, not great. But let's move into our next story, where Billie Eilish is in talks for movie acting debut with the Bell Jar film adaptation. She's set to make her acting debut in the film adaptation of the novel by Sylvia Plath called The Bell Jar. Academy Award winner Sarah Polley is set to adapt and direct the film, her first movie since the Best Adapted Screenplay Oscar for Women Talking in 2023. Now, this is another Hollywood musician, or not Hollywood musician, I guess you could say, but like global superstar in music that is slowly moving into acting. Harry Styles tried it a few years ago. By the way, the new album, absolutely fantastic. Kiss All the Time, Disco Occasionally. I think it's so good. Then we have, Charlie XCX, who recently has been sort of dabbling in some acting roles, whether it is The Moment, a movie that she leads, or there's a film that they just played at South by Southwest, Erotica, Erupcia, something like that. And then she's also going to be in I Want Your Sex, which comes out this year, right? It comes out in the fall or summer, but this is not an uncommon thing where musicians are moving into acting. It's been going on forever and ever. The best example ever is probably David Bowie in The Prestige. He absolutely knocks it out of the park in that film. So I'm excited. I mean, she's been on SNL and has been very funny in SNL sketches, so I'm not sure what the tone of this movie is going to be. I mean, given that it's from the writer of Women Talking, I feel like it's not going to be a slapstick comedy, so SNL isn't exactly the best point of reference. What I do worry about is these Hollywood stars that are like, okay, you know what, I'm going to move into acting, and then you get a hurry up tomorrow situation where The Weeknd is doing some of the most diabolical acting of all time. Even in Uncut Gems, his one scene, pretty terrible when you watch it back. Like, he is very, I'm on the phone, I have deals, doing his whiny voice. I will give Billie Eilish the benefit of the doubt, though. She is the queen of the Billie Eilish boomerang idol on Survivor, so you know what, good for her. But let's move into our next story. Michael Sarnowski, who did A Quiet Place Day One, is reportedly being eyed to direct the Alien Romulus sequel. Now, this sequel has been in development for a little while, I would say, and it's in the long tradition of Alien directors who will direct and write the first film, then they will just write the second one and hand it off to another director, or just not even be involved in the second film at all. So this film, Fede Alvarez wrote and directed Alien Romulus, and it looks like he is just not going to be involved in the directing part of things, but he is writing the screenplay. He said in an interview recently, or just like towards the end of last year, that yeah, he's thinking he might not direct it because he would like to see another vision behind the camera and who can sort of take this franchise in a new direction. I like that idea. Like, I think Fede Alvarez did a great Force Awakens job where we're basically doing the previous films, setting up a new world with new interesting characters while kind of doing a different villain a little bit, but not, I don't know. Yeah, it was a different villain, I would say. As for Michael Sarnowski, who did A Quiet Place Day One, I actually think that movie had some juice to it. It was pretty entertaining. It's well paced. The action is great. Storytelling is pretty exceptional. I love the cast in that movie. So I think this is not a bad choice at all, especially Michael Sarnowski is a director that went into a franchise that John Krasinski had kind of been taking care of for 2 films and then decided to hand it off. And I don't even think John Krasinski wrote that one. No, I think it was just like a franchise continuation, right? right? So very, very interesting. I'm curious to see what direction are we taking the Alien franchise. Are we going to do maybe a Predator tie-in? I know that is kind of the end goal, and that's what the who's the guy that did Predator Badlands, Killer of Killers and Prey? I cannot remember his Dan Trachtenberg, right? I think he said like the end goal is eventually another Alien v Predator, and I'm really wondering, is this film gonna set it up? Is Alien Romulus sequel going to be sort of the stepping stone into the next one? I'm not sure, but I'm very excited for the prospect of that. Two franchises that are very much, in people's good books right now. I mean, the Alien franchise wasn't exactly hated on when it comes to Covenant and Prometheus. Like, those movies really do have their diehard fan base. So I think this is a brilliant idea. Let's bring in a fresh director with fresh ideas, set up something interesting that could be a new installment, not just trying to rehash the former storylines or sort of repackage them in a soft reboot manner like Alien Romulus one. I mean, really fun movie, gorgeous movie, but you can tell it's Force Awakening it. So I'm excited for this. Let's move into our next story. Variety, Deadline, a bunch of other outlets like the Hollywood Reporter are all saying that Bradley Cooper is being eyed to direct the new Ocean's 11 prequel. So Cooper is also in talks to star opposite Margot Robbie. The move comes after Twister's director Lee Isaac Chung's recent exit. That was last week. It was over creative differences, whatever that means. Cooper signing on to helm the project would keep it on track to shoot before the end of the year. Originally, I was under the impression, and this may have been like a couple of years ago when they first talked about this, that Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie would be leading this, and then Ryan Gosling stepped away. Now Bradley Cooper had come in to just be an actor. That was confirmed like a few months ago, I believe. Since then, of course, we have last week Lee Isaac Chung leaving the film over creative differences. So why not Bradley Cooper? You know what? He did Maestro. He did A Star is Born. He just did the movie with Will Arnett last year that I cannot remember the name of for some reason. Is this thing on? That's it. Oh my God. Of course, as soon as I go to look it up, that's when it really kicks in. But, he's kind of spreading his wings as a director, looking for these different options or these different tones. I mean, A Star is Born is just this tragic musical story. It's also a remake of an older film. And then you have Maestro, which of course is a kind of biopic film made for Netflix, super masterful. It's funny because it was actually one of the only two films from that Oscar year that I was like, I'm not watching that. Like, I can't stand Bradley Cooper right now. But now I feel like I've been too harsh on him almost. So I'm really interested with what he's doing in his career, because after Maestro, he goes to Is This Thing On, a way more laid back, kind of chill, making fun of artists movie in a little bit of a way, or at least his role is, in my opinion, where he's this like stoner artist who's kind of like, oh yeah, man, all about it, just laid back. It's really funny to see him kind of dabbling in these different ponds, going to like, oh, maybe I'll just shoot this little thing with Will Arnett, my buddy. Oh, I do these huge, Oscar nominated films that are big deals as well. He could sort of stay on his own path, just keep picking up these little stories or like these more individual stories that he is attracted to. But instead, he's going into this franchise that has had a sort of sequel / reboot, whatever you want to call it, with Ocean's 8. They're doing another Ocean's film as well with George Clooney and the whole gang. So we're going to have multiple Ocean's movies coming out at once. I don't really see the point in that. Like, I don't know. I don't really need an Ocean's 11 prequel when we're going to get Ocean's 14 with George Clooney. It's an interesting career choice. Maybe Lee Isaac Chung stepped away because the Ocean's 14 thing was kind of stepping on the toes of this film, or whatever the reason might be. I'm very interested to hear that. And Cooper is definitely a gifted director who I think has the sauce. He definitely has the vision. So why not? I'll give it a chance. I'm curious. I'm a huge Ocean's film fan, so let's see what happens. But our final story before we get into Undertone, a Bon Jovi movie is set at Universal Pictures, so they are tuning up for a definitive biopic on the formative years of Bon Jovi, the group that emerged from humble New Jersey origins to sell over 130 million albums and earn their way into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Songwriters Hall of Fame. This comes off the back of a Bruce Springsteen biopic just this year, or last year, I guess. We're about to get a Michael Jackson biopic in, a month and a half? Just over a month, I would say. We are continuing on this biopic train. I do not know why I ever thought in my mind, oh, maybe Springsteen might slow it down a little bit, or maybe after A Complete Unknown that might be it. They might just be like, all right, this is a a good one to end on kind of for right now. Let's take a little break. No, we're right away going into more and more biopics. And I think it's just, I don't know why sometimes I get optimistic about Hollywood. Like, oh yeah, maybe they will learn their lessons and think, you know what? This is a genre that's kind of overexposed. Instead, they're going to cast someone huge to play Bon Jovi. I'm really curious who it's going to be. John Bon Jovi is not, the tallest guy, and we're going to get some short star playing him. The biopic genre is just very overdone to me. I can't invest myself in them unless you're going to do some crazy sort of subverted biopic, almost like Marty Supreme was, where, it's based on a real guy, but it's not really the true story of who he was. I'm way more into that idea, or you have to do some really batshit crazy stuff like Baz Luhrmann did with Elvis to make it entertaining, or you need just a stellar performance to carry it all with Timothée Chalamet and A Complete Unknown. But all of those movies at the end of the day are kind of the same story, and they're just kind of doing the same things. Maybe it'll be something different. I hope it is. But okay, I'm going to wrap up the news there. Remember, timestamps down below. If you don't want Undertone spoiled for you, go ahead, just listen to the non-spoiler section. Then you can jump to the What Else I Watched segment. Tons to talk about there. But what do you say? Should we talk about Undertone? Let's do it. Let's talk about Undertone. Undertone is a Canadian horror film written and directed by Ian Tucson. This is a very, very, very new director on a budget of $500,000. Yes, you heard me right, $500,000. Reviews are currently fairly mixed to positive, I want to say. 6.6 on IMDb, 77% on Rotten Tomatoes with 54% audience score. On Letterboxd, it has a 3.3 average rating with 3.5 stars being the mode. So, it's like a mostly positive film, I would say. But the synopsis for Undertone: the host of a popular paranormal podcast becomes haunted by terrifying recordings mysteriously sent her way. The film stars Nina Kiri as Eva Babich, Adam DeMarco as Justin, Michelle Duquette as Mama, Kina Bastidas as Jessa, Jeff Young as Mike, and Ryan Turner as Darren. Very, very, very small cast. 2 people total in the film. But let's talk about Undertone. Here are my initial thoughts on this film. I think this is a really cool kind of kickstart for a new chapter of Canadian horror. I mean, for Canadian filmmaking as well. And there's a lot of real indicators that, there's more things to come from Canada. We got Heated Rivalry, Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, and now Undertone made a little bit of a splash this week in popularity. So I think with this director, with, these actors, and maybe a new opportunity for Canadian media is coming. This is a telefilm project, and we also have VVS Films involved who do the distribution in Canada, along with A24. So it's just a really, really interesting project. As I said, I actually went to my first press screening on Monday night for this film. So I was invited a few weeks back saying, oh, we're having a Canadian premiere for Undertone at Scotiabank Theatre here in Toronto. I've only gone to TIFF. That's the most press experience I've ever had in my life. But this was the first time that I got an email inviting me to an actual big movie. I've been invited to some smaller ones, but this was like, oh shit, this is an A24 movie. This is a big deal. So it was exciting. I brought my girlfriend as a +1. She doesn't really like horror movies, but it was, a press screening and it was going to be cool. So we went. Absolutely packed theater. I mean, there's influencers, the actors, the director, there's all the production team and people that were involved in the film, Canadian film industry people, there's reviewers, critics, bloggers, YouTubers. I got there, we line up, we have to sign in, and then they give us a cool pin as a bit of merch that you can see in a video I posted about this. They also had this photo installation where you could take a picture at like the podcast desk from the movie, and then there's also interviews going on. So yeah, it was just a big fanfare. We had a really cool introduction from the coordinator of Fantasia Fest, which is a Canadian horror festival. Director introduced the movie, and then we get to watch it, and it was just really, really, really fun. It is extremely different attending a press screening rather than, a public screening, because maybe some people might be a little more inclined to have this crazy reaction or like, oh my god, this is the wildest movie I've ever seen. And it was funny making a video about it after, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a cool vlog and I'm gonna post it, I'm gonna tag them and stuff, and in my vlog I'm like, am I being too Mr. Beast at this event? I just trapped 100 influencers in a room, or new movie is the biggest thing ever, sort of Jerry Seinfeld voice there, but you get what I mean. Like, am I being too light about this? More talking about the experience. I had a really fun time. It was a cool thing. Go to a film, and I was like, you know what, on the podcast I can really voice my opinion about what I love about this movie, some things that I find find less than impressive or that I think really hold this movie down. So thank you, VVS Films, A24 Telefilm, for putting on the premiere. Thank you, VVS, for inviting me. I had a blast. Now let's actually talk about Undertone, starting with sort of the development of this project. So this was shot last year, a $500,000 budget. It's one location. I think it's the director's house as well, which is fascinating. I think that's what he said in the Q&A. Someone on the Reddit was saying, oh, I heard the writer, wrote this movie while he was living alone in the house where they shot, and that made me go to the movie. So that is a little bit of a selling point. The fact that it is this much smaller, sort of interesting production. It's a Canadian film is a big selling point here. It's very sort of analog and small and classic in its filmmaking. It is an indie film. The development of this project is also interesting over the next year because it actually premiered at the 29th Fantasia International Film Festival in July of 2025, where it won the Gold Audience Award for Canadian films. And then in August, A24 acquired the distribution rights to the film in a 7-figure deal. So it was a huge thing. And now it's being released in the United States and Canada. I also think it is going to UK and Ireland as well. It might get a global release, not just UK. I feel like it is going to go to Australia, but just this movie is a big deal for Canadian film and media in general. We've talked about it in the last month. It's not even been a month since Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie has come out, but we've talked a lot about Canadian media in the last month as Hollywood's sort of dying out a little bit, and people are looking to these other places of where can we get our media, who's going to be the new sort of leading voices in creativity, and maybe Canada could be one of those sources. Now, for the actual meat of the film, I think we should start with the performances as always, starting with Nina Kiri as Evie, but she's really great in this film. She's a Serbian Canadian actress, so she does kind of the Orthodox Catholic guilt super well. I mean, the character feels very lived in. She doesn't feel too dimensional or underwritten. She doesn't feel like a caricature. She actually feels like someone that really does sell this film, and I think is a real guiding light in this movie. Then we have Adam DeMarco, who a lot of people will know. He was in Overcompensating, I think is what the show is called, but even bigger than that, he was in The White Lotus Season 2. He is the son of the guy that hires the prostitute to be in Italy with them, and then he ends up falling in love with her, and she dupes him in the end. That is Adam DeMarco. He is a Canadian actor. He is in this film, and I think I really appreciate his role maybe the most in the film because it is a voice-only role. Actually, that's not true. I think the mum is really interesting, but it is a voice-only role, and I think there's a lot of really interesting work that comes from that. He doesn't get to have the kind of physical embodiment. He is simply doing a voice-only. He's very limited in the film as well. He's only there while they're recording the podcast, so the physicality comes from what's in the house, and then a lot of the emotional conspiracy and investigative stuff comes from them, and I love it so much. Then we have Michelle Duquette as Mama. She's fantastic in this film. She plays her mom that's dying, and a wonderful performance, but we can't go into spoilers. Let's talk about the directing though. Ian Toussaint. He's a short film director. This is his first feature film, I want to say, and he's actually developing a new Paranormal Activity film. So he is, a new kid on the block, and this movie's technical as hell. I was really impressed with his directing style, how much he is letting the silence really eat away at us and how much he is letting the camera do the storytelling. He reminds me a lot of Longlegs from Oz Perkins, where it's a lot of slow pans, look around the room and really letting us live in this space, wonder what's going to jump out at us. Oh, should I be looking at this corner, this corner, this corner? It doesn't all just need to be jump scares 24/7. The way he's using the camera pans is just so fascinating. How we'll be watching her sit at a table recording the podcast. It does a 180 pan and then all of a sudden it pans back to her, but it looks like we've been going the same way the entire time because it's a mirror and we're sort of absorbing into these mirrors. And just his use of reflection and mirrors and kind of this film talking about seeing yourself and other things is really a selling point that I think just works so well. And he cares a lot about atmosphere. I think so much of this movie, like I said, is letting you sit in silence, especially it's a podcasting movie. There's noise canceling headphones, and it's not just making you look at all these crazy things. It really is trying to mess with you by cutting our hero's hearing away, and that she can only hear the podcast. She can't hear what's happening in the house. She doesn't know what's going on in the house. But then also what he's doing with the sounds in the house and things that are clicking or like a clock. And it's just so creepy. It feels like this old house and this old environment that has gone stale, and there is something dark looming over it. So he builds that atmosphere incredibly well. As for the story, I think the bones of the script are there. Like there is a foundation here that I think really works. There's a great selling point point, but I'm just not sure it's filled out enough. I felt like there was a little bit just too much plain straightforwardness in this film, or even just a little bit too light. And the ending in particular, which obviously I'm not going to spoil because we're in non-spoilers, but I really didn't like the ending of this movie. I think the third act is going for some crazy swings, but the final scene, I really was like, oh, that's it? Okay, well, I guess, but no spoilers though. I won't say it, but I will say I love what he's doing with podcasting. And, podcasting is a really interesting selling point for this movie because, it's a little bit meta right now that I am doing this, and I was a podcaster that I was invited to a premiere about a horror film about podcasting, and it's so culturally ingrained in us now. It's radio, and I'm sure 40 years ago there were radio horror films, and there's always been these eras of horror films that we've seen. We've gone through these different sort of, phases of pop culture horror movies, whether it is the drive-in movies, whether it is camping, whether it is the stoner films, whether it is the kids are not all right phase. I mean, all of these different kind of horror genre eras that we've had. And then we get to the Scream movies where they're starting to be metatextual, referencing themselves. Now we have this new chapter where it's like, oh, it's about podcasting. The film does a great job setting up Evie as this podcast host and the dynamic between her and Justin, and how they are kind of playing these characters on the podcast where she has to be super skeptical and he's like a, ooh, let's take a look, type host, where they're playing a little bit good cop, bad cop, or skeptic, believer, just to have that dramatic tension. And multiple times in the film, they say, let's get back into character, or okay, let's listen to this, but we got to get back in character, and it's like sort of a joke, I think, the way they're saying it, or they're just like sort of, let's get into the zone. And I really like that element. It is also a little bit how they are in real life. And, once they turn off the podcast, once the audio or the recording isn't going anymore, it's interesting how Evie is not a believer in the things that are happening around her. And there's this big kind of third act revelation about belief systems that relates to that skepticism. Are they playing characters? Are they playing themselves? Or are they just sort of playing a version of themselves and playing it up for the podcast? I don't know. I had a lot of questions about the logistics of their podcast because he's in London at 9 a.m. Actually, someone at the premiere, and it was kind of embarrassing, asked the director about the logistics of the podcast. So if Justin is in London and it's 9 a.m. and she's back in Canada and she's recording at 2 a.m., like, how long are they recording for and all this stuff? And the director's like, yeah, I did the math, and it just like kind of made sense to me. But even the whole time I was watching, I was like, okay, so they're recording an hour once a week, or like every few days they're recording a little bit. I didn't really understand how long the lifespan of this movie is, or how long we go from start to finish. Is it like 7 days? Is it a few weeks? I think it's a couple weeks, and that's why there's like 3 episodes total that they're doing, or 4 episodes total. But they're also releasing every Monday or every Friday. I don't know. A little bit confusing. I think the time and the logistics of this movie shouldn't be what your breaking point is, to be honest, but it was a little bit funny that people are like, I do not understand. Are they recording like 10-minute increments? It's a little bit distracting. This is a slow burn horror movie. There are jump scares, yes, of course, and they're doing some better jump scares than others. I don't like when it's just like, oh, my microphone was near my headphones, sorry, and it's like a audio sort of glitch out. That's the jump scare. I like when it's things in the room, or something dropping, or someone grabbing someone. But of course, it's about a person that's kind of alone in the house with her dying mother, so you can't do some of the jump scares. I get what they're going for, but sometimes it feels cheaper than others. But I think the movie does a good job with the slow burn element of being so reserved with the moments that it's going for it, and being so reserved with its reveals and like the big swings that it's going for. It really makes you wait on every single word, every single recording. And I haven't really, explained to you guys. I'm sure some of you have seen the trailer, but if you haven't, essentially the recordings that they get, there's 10 recordings, and they're going through each of them. And as, the recordings go through, crazier and crazier shit starts happening in their lives, or specifically Evie's life. That's what you get from this trailer and the film itself. The idea is that these podcasts have like hidden messages, and the whole film is kind of about these hidden messages. It's really interesting, but the movie does a really good job, parsing out, I would say, the first 6 audio clippings that they're listening to. But then when we got to like the last 4, or maybe the last 2, I would say, they kind of just fly through them. I didn't love that. I feel like there was a little bit of a pacing issue there, or like, oh shit, okay, we have like 4 more. We got to get through these. So some of these we just got to burn through. But also, maybe the biggest reason to see this movie in theaters is the sound design of this film. I went to a Cineplex where the premiere was held in AVX. So that is like their version of IMAX, essentially, with the really good sound system, a huge screen. The sound design did so much of the creepiness for me as opposed to what's actually happening on screen. Whether it is, it sounds like footsteps while she has her noise canceling headphones on and all we hear is the podcast audio. Are there things happening in the house? Is it happening in the podcast they're listening to or the audio clippings? It really does mess with you. And yeah, it's just like the sound design. They do this one trick where they're listening to the clippings, the audio clippings that they were sent anonymously. And as they're listening to things in these audio clippings that are happening in someone's house that they're listening to in different parts of their house, the camera is moving around Evie's house and showing sort of where it could be in this space. And it was interesting because the director said, yeah, we actually just like got the actors to go to the house and act out everything that was happening or everything they were doing in the house in these different spaces. And then I just recorded the audio from all the different spaces they were going to. So later I could reference it with where the camera was going to be while Evie is listening to these audios. So it's like sort of showing you the empty space, but you can imagine in your head what's happening in that space. And I just thought it was some really great visual storytelling, a really, really, really fascinating way to show us horror or sort of, I don't know, make us imagine horror that's going on. So what is this movie actually about, though, is a big question I had, because thematically, I did feel that the movie was a little bit on the lighter side of things. Like I said, not a lot of meat to chew off of these bones. I think this movie is really about being a caretaker and how draining that can be, because when you stop kind of taking care of yourself or things take a turn for the worse, who's going to be your caretaker because you're so focused on that other person? This is also a movie about her mother dying. That is not a spoiler that her mother dies. Like, it is waiting for that moment. And it's actually about the waiting element, not the dying element, that is so painful and how that can drive you crazy. Just waiting for suffering to end and almost living in this kind of middle gray area, I guess. Another element that I appreciated in particular, her last name in the film is Babic. That is a Balkan last name. My family is partially from the Balkans. My mother is Croatian. I am half Croatian. I'm a dual citizen. So I sort of know that culture. And there is a lot of Catholic guilt, and I would say, Balkan immigrant child Catholic guilt, or child of a sort of immigrant Balkan person, that is really interesting in this film. The film is also about skeptics who refuse to believe, or even when evidence is clear, like, what are you willing to buy into? When do you kind of bring your fences down? And then motherhood, death, a new life, and the cycles of kind of mistreatment, miscare, and abandonment, but also assigning meaning to things that are just kind of ordinary. Like with religious experiences all the time, people will assign religious meaning to things that don't necessarily mean anything. And that's what a lot of this movie is about. And like, there's a lot of really messy kind of details and naive elements with our main character, that she plays the skeptic on a podcast, but she has no real world knowledge. But all right, let's just get into my 2 stars and a wish for Undertone, and then I want to hop into some spoilers. Star number 1. I think this movie just does a great job of being shot in one location. This house never feels stale or boring, and I'm never wanting to leave this world. I really love the environment that's being constructed, and there's just a great job from Ian Tucson of building up atmosphere and environment in this film and making every room feel very lived in and very unique and on its own, that I absolutely loved. And then star number 2, like I spoke about, the sound mixing is just elite in this film. It's so good. I encourage you all to see this in theaters. I saw someone that left a comment on Reddit saying the sound system or the sound design in this film is like having $10,000 speakers on a $1,000 car. And I would say that my wish, it feels a little bit hollow. I just think thematically there's some stuff that is missing here, and I wish just maybe that we could have been given some more to chew on. I think there's a lot of really, really, really great ideas here, but they don't all come together. So look, overall, I think Undertone is a really, really solid entry into the Canadian horror kind of canon, and I'm excited to see what Ian Tucson does next. I think he's shown that he can create an interesting horror movie. I hope his Paranormal Activity movie, which is like the 8th one, is a success. But for now, I am giving Undertone a 3.5 stars, maybe going down to a 3. I don't know. It feels like the further I get away from the movie, I'm sort of coming up with reasons in my head of like, yeah, that didn't really work for me. But I don't know. For now, 3.5. Let's get into some spoilers. Okay, so spoilers for Undertone. If you don't want this movie ruined for you, I would stop listening right now. Go to the What Else I Watched segment. But let's talk about the pregnancy element of this film. So it is revealed that Evie is pregnant. She just throws up one scene in the morning and she calls her doctor, says, "Hi, I'd like to schedule a pregnancy test." Interesting that she immediately said, "I need to go to a doctor for that." She didn't go to a corner store and get a pregnancy test. Anyways, that's nitpicking the details. But I think the whole string, the pregnancy string of this film, is a little bit underdeveloped. I like the roots of it. Again, the bones of this movie are strong. You got strong bones, but it's just the meat on it is not there. It's a film that is so focused on Evie as a caretaker and how she takes care of her mom and loves her mom, but she is abandoning her, or she is starting to lose hope, and she is just kind of wanting her mother to die at this point because she just hates seeing her suffer. But now she's essentially blaming herself for not taking care of her mother, and instead of taking care of this, new form of life that could grow into a human inside of her, she starts drinking again to possibly kill the baby. And it's just really interesting how this film is trying to study Evie as a caretaker, not just of herself, of her mother, of this new baby that could grow inside of her, because she's just newly pregnant, so it's literally just a seed. But it's just I don't know. I mean, it's interesting that she doesn't call and try to set up that she's not ready in her life, that she wants to maybe have an abortion. But then there's this pivotal scene where she tells her mom, as she is dying in bed, she says, "Mom, I'm pregnant and I'm ready to be a mother. I'm so excited to be a mother." And what's so interesting about that part of the story is I think that is her telling her mother, "I can take care of something. I know I didn't take great care of you, but this is a thing that I will care about. Be proud of me, Mom." And she's also asking the nurse that comes in, can she hear me right now when she is dead? She's like, "Not really, but I like to believe that maybe there is something in the air when all of this is happening." So it's just a lot of tension on the mother-daughter relationship and dynamic in this film, whether it is a dying mother and her daughter, a caretaker daughter and their dying parent, a daughter that is, very young, newly pregnant, and is maybe not ready for all of this. So there's a lot being thrown at the wall here, and I don't know if it all sticks from Ian Tucson, but I do appreciate the kind of effort here. Her boyfriend is a piece of shit. Her relationship with Justin is not really explored. How did they meet? I guess they went to university together is how I'm understanding it, in Waterloo. Shout out University of Waterloo and Laurier. Those are the Waterloo Kitchener universities here in Canada. There's this, moment where Justin's like, "Oh, do you want me to come and help out there because I could, be of assistance?" And she's like, No, don't come all this way. He's way in London. So there is that time difference and distance between them. But her boyfriend has one phone call with her in this entire film, and then she just starts to ignore him. I don't know. It was a really weird sort of thread that's forgotten for the rest of the film. I guess because the movie's taking place over a week and a half. Again, I'm not really sure. So maybe she just ignored her boyfriend for a week. I don't want to get hung up on the details. Maybe that's a relationship that could have been a little bit more explored, her and her boyfriend. But again, this movie is trying to focus on the podcast element, that she has this friend that she's doing a podcast with, and it's the two of them trying to investigate and pick apart these audio recordings that they have received. Now, a lot of this movie, as the trailer said, is about hidden messages and assigning meaning to hidden messages, especially in the email they get, which is an anonymous email. They go through it. They have the 10 audio recordings. Then at the end, it just says Tenet. Tenet shout out. That's amazing. But Tenet is a palindrome where it's the same forward as it is backwards. And these songs are not the same forward as they are backward. There's different meaning in each way. So I was like, oh, that's a fascinating word to put in there. Is that because Ian Tucson's just a Tenet fan? But the song her mom sang her as a child, and I thought that was a pretty chilling inclusion, was Baba Black Sheep, I guess is that's what it's called, right? Now she is kind of skeptical of her own life. And again, there's this sort of separation between the podcast Evie and real life Evie, where this message is just starting to get, or these audio recordings are starting to get incredibly personal for her and what's happening in her personal life. And she is not just assigning meaning to these audio recordings, which Justin has been doing for most of the movie. It is now Evie who is curious, and she's doing the research herself. She is the one that has to, take all this information away on the podcast, break it down, and try to prove what's wrong with it, why it's not true, and show her skeptic side. Versus now she is listening to all these children's rhymes, and she is finding all these meanings, and she is fully converted by halfway through the movie. She is fully believing, sort of bringing meaning into her life. So the idea of this movie is all about assigning meaning to things that could be meaningless. And from there, that's when they spawn this demon into life. And that's what these 10 audio recordings are, is they are supposed to drive people crazy, spawning demons into their life. But it's also just like losing yourself in these audio recordings. Are you actually spawning a demon? Are you not? I did see this one Reddit comment that was like, me when I'm the host of a true crime adjacent supernatural podcast, but I've not heard about the recent grisly murder suicide of a young couple that took place in the town I live in, and I spend my day walking around gazing at every reflective surface in my house before recording my podcast for 10 minutes. I thought it was funny that she instantly knew how to spell Abazu. Yeah, there's a lot of like weird sort of plot jumps in this movie, or sort of knowledge jumps that I was, and I don't want to be what do you call it, critical drinker, or everything wrong with this movie, whatever you want to call that. What's that YouTube channel? I can't remember their name now, but I don't like watching movies like that. But there's just so much about the character of Evie that I'm like, how do you not know about that? How would you never hear about those people in your town that murdered themselves and then murdered their child? How would you not hear about like all of these crazy things that are going on? Or sorry, they didn't murder their child, but they murder each other, and there's a crying baby. I don't know. There's so many far-fetched things that I'm willing to forgive in horror movies and be like, yeah, that doesn't really make sense, but you know what? It kind of works within this world. But her being a true crime podcast, supernatural podcast, and not hearing about these two young people that went crazy in her town and killed themselves. Interesting how Justin is not really affected by these things, but it's simply Evie. And I think that's because there is no demon. It is that Evie is losing her mind. So at the end of the day, it's not really like a supernatural film. You can believe what you want, and you can like a lot of this movie. You can assign meaning to what's happening in the movie, and you can give it this sort of supernatural element. But I think it's about a girl that is slowly going into madness because of these strenuous conditions that she has been going through, the upbringing that she's had with Catholicism and religion in her life. And I just found it super fascinating, some of the elements that it is trying to grow here. Even if it doesn't all come off, like it doesn't all work, I still had a lot of fun with it. So I don't know, the end sort of scene, it just cuts to black after what I will say is a fantastic sort of one-shot sequence going through the entire house, where there's drawings all over the walls, there's chairs on the ceiling, there's shadows and lights going everywhere, and it's just like so fantastic. And I thought it's going for it in these last couple minutes, but then it cuts to black when she's enter her mom's bedroom and she sees her mom in the reflection standing up after she has died. It cuts to black and we just hear Evie sort of going insane, and she dies supposedly, or kills herself, I suppose. And it's like, oh, is it her mother that she saw a reflection of herself in the mirror when it's actually herself? And I don't know. I just thought as a final scene, I don't love the cut to black, rely on audio, when so much of the movie has been about showing interesting footage while focusing on audio. But now that we're completely in the dark focusing on this audio, it was sort of an ironic ending that I think doesn't pull it all together. What about Justin? Like, what happens with him? I guess this is more just about a story of Evie going insane. She thinks she has killed her mom because she admits to Justin, my mother asked me to pray with her. I said no. That's probably what caused her mom to stop eating, thus why she started to get worse and worse, and why she died in the end. So Evie is applying meaning to all of these things. Had she just taken the time to be a believer, not be the skeptic, and just buy into a system or buy into some sort of beliefs or just entertain the idea, maybe her mom would have still been around. I don't know. Could there be a sequel to this film? Maybe. Do I want there to be a sequel? No, I'm kind of happy with it just being its own thing, but I think I'm going to wrap up the spoilers there. That has been Undertone, a very interesting Canadian horror film. Let me know what you thought down below, whether you're on Spotify, YouTube, if you see my video on social media. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Undertone. But okay, let's get into what else I watched. Alrighty, what else I watched? I have 7 movies and 3 TV shows. I do want to say that I bought Project Hail Mary. I am so excited to start reading it next week. I'm seeing the film actually the day after I'm recording this on Saturday the 14th in 70mm IMAX in Vaughan. I will probably see it more than once, but tomorrow will be the initial watch, and then I will start reading Project Hail Mary as well. I haven't touched comic books in a little while. I just haven't been feeling like or had the time really with all the Oscar catching up I've been doing to read comic books, but I promise this is the last week of Oscar catch-ups. After this, we've got plenty of time for classic movies, new movies, and comic books to read that we will talk about. But let's start with some TV shows, shall we? Survivor 23, South Pacific, of course. We have been catching up, and it's a really interesting season because it feels so old-fashioned. I mean, when you have Brandon Hance and Michaela and that situation where he simply doesn't like her because she is a good-looking girl, and he thinks that, like, oh my god, that's sinful that I'm attracted to her. And you have Coach, who I'm, a huge fan of, but then he's really leaning into the religious stuff, sort of egging Brandon on. And like after they win a challenge, they all gather in a group to do a group prayer, and it's kind of lame. It feels like one of the more conservative seasons, I would say. So I don't know, we're sort of making our way through that, and we just had Ozzy win on redemption against Christine, who was there for like 5 battles in a row. Then we have Survivor 50 episode 3. Just so you guys know, if you haven't seen it, if you're only a listener of the show but not on my social media, I'm doing every Wednesday night, I record a Survivor video where I try to predict before the episode who's going home, and then I record myself after the episode talking about how that was, who's my winner pick. So that's fun, go check that out. But episode 3, we got a tribe swap. I really love the new tribes. We have all of the David versus Goliath people on one tribe together, where it was like, oh, maybe are they gonna turn on each other, that way they can advance their own games? No, they're tight as hell. I don't know why I ever got that impression. Poor Q, honestly. I think Q is such a good Survivor player. He is so entertaining. I think he is one of the best characters we've had in the new era. I have no doubt that he's going to actually play Survivor again, probably. If they do a new era All-Stars, they have to have him back, because he had an early boot this season that I was just really bummed about. And I listened to a little bit, just kind of the start while I was setting this up actually to record his interview with The Pod Has Spoken about his exit. And I think he knew the writing was on the wall because he had lost his vote, and the David versus Goliath trio, of course, was super tight. So it was never really going to work out that he could flip Emily, possibly. And I mean, just the sequence, maybe the best sequence of this episode was Emily finding out from Christian on the mat at the challenge. And I thought Christian didn't handle it great either, but Emily finding out on the mat, she goes back to camp, she tells them all, Christian told me Aubrey has an idol. And it's like, oh my god, she is just blabbing like crazy. And then she, tells absolutely everybody, talks about everybody, says, I might vote with you guys, I love you guys. Then she goes to Christian and she's like, hey, so I did a horrible thing. That was hilarious. Like from last week, me thinking, oh, Emily's playing a great game, to this week, I'm like, oh, maybe she's actually not a good Survivor player. She understands the strategy, but I don't think she can implement it. Just like, what a 180-degree swing. But Q going home, really big bummer. I think like next week, Stephanie might be in trouble. I don't know. There's a few people I think could be in trouble, but Survivor 50, absolutely fantastic. I'm hooked. I think it's the best season we have had in so long. Let's talk about The Pit season 2, episode 10, which was 4 p.m. Santos, dude, you gotta chill. You are being unprofessional, being so rude to Langdon, being snarky, and she even got yelled at this week by Garcia and Al Hashimi, all sticking up for Langdon, and she's like purposefully trying to get Langdon in trouble to be like, oh, look, I told you all. I don't know. I'm loving what they're doing with Langdon of like, look, people make mistakes and you need to move past it. But then Langdon also getting to have the Mel and her sister character element where she's like, yeah, well, I can't really tell your sister, or I can't tell you what your sister's issue is, so you have to talk to her. And Mel is just going through it right now. Some people online are sort of interpreting Mel's sister saying, oh, I know why you like Langdon now, as like meaning like have feelings for. I thought she just meant like, oh, like him as a friend. Like, I understand why you like him. And it was the same way as like, oh, that's Dr. Robbie. He's really nice. I see why she, speaks about you at home. So I don't know. It was a little bit like, ooh, is that what she meant by that? And then Robbie just being incredibly unprofessional. And I think the Mohan Robbie dynamic is really interesting because clearly Robbie sees himself in her, and that's why he's yelling at her to leave her baggage at the door like he couldn't a few months earlier. When he had his huge breakdown about the doctor that he lost during COVID and he couldn't save, and it's clear that he is bringing his emotional baggage into this situation, which was like, oof, Robbie, not a good look, man. But Mohan having essentially a heart attack was kind of crazy, or a panic attack, I guess you could say. Girl, you got to get it together. I feel so bad for her. She's just going through it right now. I just think the show is kind of firing on all cylinders. I did think episode 10 was too short, though. There's, the dying mother storyline that I think they're rushing through a little bit right now, and they don't know how to wrap up, or they don't know like, okay, when's the final swing we can take with her. I am waiting to see like what's the big thing like Pit Fest that we're going for this season, and I guess it's going to be, is it an ice storyline in the next episode? Is it the blackout thing that's been happening? I don't know, the cyber attack, but we've already been having that developing. So I'm very curious, what is the big disaster we're going to deal with in the last 5 episodes? But The Pit season 2, I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. Let's move into the films I watched, where I have 7 things to talk about this week. It is very exciting because this is the last week of Oscar catch-up. Like, this is it. I'm excited to be done with it. I have watched 46 out of 50 nominees this year. The only ones I haven't seen are Viva Verity, the Diane Warren story, or the story of Diane Warren. I believe those are the 2 best original song nominations that I haven't seen, or nominees that I haven't seen. And then we have The Ugly Stepsister, which is hair and makeup, as well as Kokuho, which is another makeup and hairstyling. I couldn't get around to those 2. I started The Ugly Stepsister. I think I mentioned this, but I was sick at the time, and I got halfway through and I was like, hey, I'm not retaining any of this. I'm falling asleep. I will come back to this. I don't think I'll have time to. And the Kokuho is a 3-hour Japanese film that played at my theater here in Toronto, I believe, but it's not anymore, and I don't know where to find it. And I just don't have time till the Oscars on Sunday to catch up with those, but that's okay. 46 out of 50 is pretty decent. Next year, I'm really going to go for 50 for 50, and I'm going to start even earlier. I'm going to make sure in January I find a way to watch all the shorts and the documentaries, get them out of the way nice and early. But yeah, we've done pretty well this year, so you can look forward to me not talking about the Oscars. Let's start with one of the animated shorts, The Three Sisters. It's about these 3 sisters that are living on this island, and when they can't afford food or rent because they drop their money in the ocean or whatever, a sailor comes, and it's about all 3 girls trying to impress this sailor. I don't know how I felt about this story. Like, it's cute, but it felt like a very kind of 2008 mini clips game animation, or a YouTube short that we would be watching way back in 2008. It felt very like dated. It's like, I don't think it's bringing anything particularly special to the table, so I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I watched A Friend of Dorothy, which I think is cute in a really good way. I think it's, a really, really, really adorable story about this young guy who comes to Dorothy's house, and he is in the closet. They talk about art. They start to form a relationship, and he comes to accept himself. I did think it wasn't quite developed enough, and it's ironic because, yeah, it's a short film. It's not going to be fully developed, but it sort of just felt like a warm-up for a fuller idea, or just like a little bit too bare bones, I want to say. So I gave that 3 stars. 2 people exchanging saliva, however. This is a short film from France that feels like it could absolutely be a feature film or a Black Mirror episode, where it could have gone on for another 20 minutes, but it's already 37 minutes, which is very fleshed out, no pun intended. So it's this kind of scientific future story where kissing has become illegal, and it's so out there. It's really interesting. It's well shot. It's well directed. The acting is fantastic. I was blown away by this. I watched it at 5:45 a.m. on like a Wednesday or a Tuesday morning this week when I got up and wanted to knock out a few more of the nominees before the weekend. And I was so captivated. I had my cup of coffee in my hand, and I just couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I could barely blink. I was hanging on every word. It's a gorgeous black and white film that I was just in love with. It's available on YouTube for free. So I know the Oscars are over now, but if you do want to watch it, it's totally worth it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I was fully captivated, loved it. Then we have Children No More, Were and Are Gone, which is one of the best documentary short features. It's around, I want to say it's 35 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe even less, but it is about this group of Israelis who live in Tel Aviv, and they are protesters who every week they organize a silent vigil where they are holding these posters that have Palestinian children that have been murdered on them. And the idea is they are showing photos of these children where all the children are smiling, and on the poster they say etc., the person's name, born this day, died this day, were and are gone. And they're just a group of silent protesters that are reminding people in Tel Aviv, I think they're in Tel Aviv, that, this is a genocide in Gaza. And they go about it in a very interesting way because they are silent protesters. They're not trying to provoke anyone, but they're constantly coming under abuse, people bashing them. And it's just, I don't know, it was just such a moving documentary. And there's this sort of tendency to just, and including myself, just sort of paint all Israelis under one brush. So I don't know, I was very interested to see this perspective of people that are actually boots on the ground, Israelis, people in Tel Aviv trying to make a difference and bring light. And it's not like they're showing no sympathy to the fact that hostages have been taken and there are people nearby who have missing family members, but they are highlighting that there has been years of violence in Palestine. And it's just a really, really, really moving story. I thought it was maybe a little bit too simple of a documentary documentary. Like, it's not flashy or it's not trying to go a little bit deeper with these people at all. It's very surface level, so I gave it 3.5 stars. Not awful. Then the final Oscar nominee I'm going to talk about in 2026. I'm so excited. Cutting Through Rocks. This is a documentary about this woman living in northern Iran who actually is running for office. She's the first woman elected to office in this really remote northern Iranian village, and it's just this little like 95-minute journey of her basically going through the highs and the lows of her career. You know, she's a former midwife turned fierce citizen advocate and recent divorcee, just won in a landslide election in her remote Iranian village, and everyone has an opinion about it. So it's her kind of pushing through all these barriers, whether it's letting women ride motorcycles like she grew up doing and her father taught her to do. And it's just, I was so captivated by it. I thought it was so interesting. I absolutely loved it. I think there are some chunks that feel a little bit incomplete, or it's like jumping through a lot of eras, and I don't know, it doesn't all quite glue together, but I still think it is such a fascinating subject matter given especially what is happening in Iran right now. I mean, it was just an accident. Cutting Through Rocks, 2 Iranian nominees at the Oscars this year, so just a really telling moment for the time. I gave Cutting Through Rocks 4 stars. Then we have 2 films that I watched this week that are not Oscar nominees. The first being Hoppers, a new release. I saw it in 3D, I think. Yeah, I did see it in 3D on the discount night at Scotiabank Theater. I was very excited for this movie. It's been so crazy catching up on all of these Oscar nominees that sometimes the new releases slip through the cracks. It came out last weekend. I had a friend in town, so I was like, you know what, Tuesday night, let's go see Hoppers. Packed crowd. It was almost fully sold out. I think it was only the front 2 rows that had seats left. I loved it. They did Avatar with beavers. I think it's adorable. It has so much to say about like nature, our connection to nature, what you can do with this amazing peaceful land around you and how it can bring you peace on the inside. It's not just to look at, but it's to feel with, and it was hilarious. The ending made me cry. I was choking back tears multiple times. I think the animation is really great as well. They showed like a previs thing that they did a few years ago that looked incredibly Studio Ghibli, and people online were like, why would you not go with that animation style? Completely agree. It was gorgeous, but a great voice cast as well. I mean, Meryl Streep's in it. Like, holy shit, she's in an animated Pixar movie. Just fantastic. I gave it 4 stars. But the final movie I watched this week, last night, my girlfriend and I went to the Revue Cinema here in Toronto, a cinema I have never been to, but I've been meaning to go to for a long time. If you don't live in Toronto, it's this little like boutique theater, maybe a 50-seat crowd, I don't know, 80-seat crowd, something like that. They play old movies, classic movies, new movies, special releases of movies. Like they're showing Marty Supreme on 70mm last night, and I actually bought a poster. When I was buying the poster, someone said Stolen Valor because I'm not going in to see the movie. I just saw Mamma Mia, but still, seeing Mamma Mia in theaters. I've always really liked Mamma Mia. I've seen it probably 3 or 4 times now, I want to say, and I've always been like under the impression, yeah, it's good. It's not great. I always give it like 3.5 stars. I'm very like, it's good but flawed. But seeing it in a rowdy theater that was a sing-along theater, people applauding big moments, and seeing it on the screen, just how much joy there is in that movie, I gave it 5 stars. I was having so much fun. It was just like brought me to tears in multiple scenes. After, you know, Winner Takes It All, we have Dancing Queen, where everybody's just having the most fun. And it was fun actually last month listening to the Big Picture podcast where Sean Fennessy was forced to watch Mamma Mia for the first time, and he's like, I wanted to drink wine while watching this. I loved it. Like, it's such a bad good movie. It's so true that the vibes of Mamma Mia, it seems like a bunch of actors were on an island and they were partying for multiple weeks. They're all sunburnt, they're all kind of hungover and tired, and they completely forgot that they were making a movie. The vibes are immaculate. I know it's not perfect, but seeing it on the big screen, I was in heaven. I gave it 5 stars for that theater experience alone. That has been what else I watched this week. I'm so happy. Again, we're done with the Oscar nominees. There's a couple of new HBO shows that are out, and I'm going to try and sneak to the theater maybe once or twice next week, although I'm really busy with work right now. So we'll see how that goes, but obviously we still have Survivor 50. But for now, that has been what else I watched. And in fact, I think that's going to do it for episode 111, Undertone, this freaky Canadian horror story. What a ride it was. As always, please rate and review the show 5 stars wherever you get your great podcasts like Watcher of All Things, whether it is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or Acast. We are, of course, an Acast-produced show. If you're on Spotify, you can literally comment right under the episode. What did you think of Undertone? Are you excited for the Oscars, or were you excited for the Oscars? What did you think of the winners? All of that stuff. Drop a comment on Spotify Spotify. If you're on the YouTube channel, hit like, subscribe, comment all that stuff down below. Check out my Oscar hopes and predictions video. I'm going to have another video in a couple or a few weeks as well. That's going to be a fun one. We actually hit 830 subscribers. I think in last week's episode, I was like, hey, let's hit 800 subs. Blew by it. So thank you all so much for that. If you want to get in touch with the show, email us, watcherofallthings@gmail.com, and find me on social media. Instagram and Threads are just at Watcher of All Things. The TikTok account is at watcher.of.all.things. So that's Watcher of All Things with just a dot between each word. And yeah, I post on social media every single day. I do tons of different kinds of videos. You can check out my Oscar reaction on Monday, as well as my report card, checking in how my score was after the Oscars. You can also find me on Letterboxd, KikiJ70. That's KIKIJ70. Follow me on there. Drop a comment under one of my reviews that you found me through the show. I will follow you back. Let's build a little community. But next week, we have a humongous episode. It is my third most anticipated movie of the year, Project Hail Mary. I am seeing it tomorrow, literally 24 hours from now. The probably opening credits will be going, or at least the trailers will be going at the Cineplex Vaughn, where I will be watching my first ever 70mm IMAX film. I am so excited. Project Hail Mary. Come back for that next week. But for now, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all for the love and support I get every week from you. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.